The guest from the Airwaves. William loved his grandmother. At the end of summer, he decided to visit her countryside home to help with cleaning and offer some company. He knew the last few months had been hard on her and wanted to support her through this difficult time. When he arrived, the familiar facade greeted him, peeling paint on the shutters, the scent of damp wood and earth hanging thick in the air. William took a deep breath, savoring the freshness. Inside, the house was empty. A note on the kitchen table explained that his grandmother had gone to the store and would be back soon. He dropped his backpack by the door and began wandering through the rooms, already making mental lists of what needed to be done. The place was in mild disarray. Dust blanketed the shelves, and muddy boot prints trailed across the hallway floor, probably left by relatives or neighbors during their last visit. He spent the next few hours tidying up, took out the trash, wiped down the furniture, rearranged books on the shelves. By the end of it, the house felt warmer, and William pleasantly tired. He poured himself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the overgrown garden behind the house. His thoughts drifted to summers past, his grandmother's pies, his grandfather's stories told by the fireplace. That evening, as twilight settled over the house like a heavy curtain, William decided to check the attic. The wooden steps creaked under his weight. Dust, boxes, ancient furniture, the usual clutter. But among the relics, one item caught his eye: an old radio. Heavy, wooden, its buttons dulled with time. He plugged it in. Nothing happened. Frowning, he noticed a wire inside had come loose. That only deepened his curiosity. He found tools in a drawer downstairs, returned with pliers and screwdrivers, and set to work. Stripping wires, soldering connections, checking the tubes, he lost track of time, consumed by the challenge. Around midnight, the radio came to life. A soft crackle, then a whisper of music. Encouraged, William turned the dials. Static at first. Then, faintly, a muffled tune, as if the device had locked onto a frequency from another time. He kept fiddling with the controls for hours. Strange bursts of voices in unfamiliar languages. Laughter, far away and wrong. The creak of doors. Eventually, exhausted, he turned it off and set it aside. Just as he turned to leave, the radio clicked back on. A voice, low and stuttering, crackled through the speaker. "I see you." William froze. He stepped back, then yanked the cord from the wall. Silence. His heart pounded in the quiet. He told himself it was just an old mechanism, nothing more. and left the room, closing the door behind him. But unease clung to him, crawling under his skin until sleep finally took him. He woke to the smell of fresh pastries and coffee. Downstairs, his grandmother was setting the table. Plates of steaming pancakes, a jar of jam, and a cup of rich, fragrant coffee sat waiting on a white tablecloth. Over breakfast, William asked her about the radio. She smiled faintly. It had belonged to the family for years, she said. His grandfather used to love it. But he stopped turning it on when it began picking up strange signals. Voices, mostly. One day, it ended up in the attic, forgotten. William remembered the voice. He didn't mention it, just nodded and promised to be careful with the old thing. That second evening was quiet. The day passed with gardening, small chores, and shared dinner. William went to bed feeling peaceful for the first time since arriving. But on the third day, things began to change. That morning, as he came down the stairs, the radio was back on. Sitting on the living room table, quietly crackling, though still unplugged. He switched it off, confused. By evening, it had turned itself on again. That night, he heard voices, muted, garbled, like whispers carried from far away. Sometimes footsteps mingled with the static, and one voice, deeper, rasping, sounded almost familiar, like his grandfather calling his name. At dawn, William awoke with the sense that someone had stood beside his bed. The room was freezing. The radio was still hissing in the darkness downstairs. Determined, William returned to the attic. Digging through the clutter, he found a dusty box of papers. Inside, a worn notebook filled with shaky handwriting. His grandfather's journal. Descriptions of voices heard at night. Shadows that slid through the house. Something he called the guest from the airwaves. There were pages of cryptic texts in unknown languages, strange symbols scrawled across the margins. One page stood out, bold letters, underlined in red. Do not turn on after midnight. William tried speaking to his grandmother about it, but her face turned pale and she hurried off to her room. Later, he saw her by the window, whispering to no one. Thin cuts lined her wrist, as if from thread or wire. That night, heavy footsteps echoed in the hallway. The radio stirred again, now rasping his name. When he reached the living room, he found his grandmother sitting before the radio, murmuring into the speaker. Her eyes were vacant. Her face wrong. As she turned, something flickered in her gaze. Something dark, not human. William froze in the doorway. She sat motionless, her lips moving silently, speaking to someone across the frequencies. He stepped closer. The radio's dial shifted on its own. Footsteps, a creaking door, as if someone was entering the house through the static. He lunged forward, grabbing his grandmother's shoulders. Her skin was ice cold, her eyes lifeless. Then came the voice, deep, glacial, every word carved in dread. Kill him. Strangle. He ripped the plug out. The radio kept playing. The cold grew sharper. In the corner, a shadow thickened, rising into a shape. Tall, twisted, its limbs too long, its head crooked like a broken doll. Empty black sockets stared straight into him. William screamed, but no sound came. He grabbed a heavy candlestick and smashed it against the radio. The speaker shrieked, cracked, and for a heartbeat, silence. Then, the whisper, "You let me in." He spun around. The room was empty. Only his grandmother, rising slowly from the chair. Her head jerked sideways with a sickening snap. A smile stretched across her lips, too wide, too still. And her voice, but not hers, echoed from the depths. "He's here now, and he's not leaving." The walls shuddered. Floorboards groaned. Darkness outside the window deepened, like ink bleeding through glass. William ran to the door. Locked. To the window, sealed like stone. The voice returned. "Open the door. Let me in." The figure stepped forward, long fingers reaching. His grandmother mirrored the motion, moving like a puppet on rusted strings. William grabbed the fire iron and beat the radio again and again. Sparks flew. Plastic shattered. Wood splintered. And when it finally broke apart, a black smoke poured out. Thick, screaming, spiraling. The figure unraveled, fading, dissolving into the night. William turned. His grandmother had collapsed, her breath shallow, her eyes returning to focus. He carried her upstairs. At sunrise, they burned the pieces in the backyard. The flames roared high. Faint voices hissed from the smoke, growing fainter, fading. "It's over now," William said. But when he looked up, he thought he saw it. A long, crooked handprint slowly forming on the inside of the window pane.